Good morning to everybody. We're going to talk about GI-ProBalance. And I'm going to introduce some terms that you may not have heard before, but you might hear them as you're talking with other people, or perhaps you're looking at things on the internet. So I want to introduce those terms to you in a few moments. And I'll give you an explanation and how that all works. Now, for those of you who may be new to this type of call, the purpose of the call is to give you the knowledge and the understanding of the product, why we created the product the way we did. And of course, there are the basics on what would you use it for, why would you need it. We'll talk about that. But I want all of you to be able to speak with confidence and sincerity when you talk to other people and you introduce them to Manatech products. For me, I think that begins with a very solid understanding of what the products are and why we made them, and then we deal with the various potential common objections that come up from people when they have questions or they've read, whatever information and they suddenly think they're experts in a particular topic. So we'll deal with all of those. That's what we do on all of these calls, and we should just get rolling. Well, GI-ProBalance. Everyone understands the purpose of GI-ProBalance. Overall, the global purpose of it is to support a healthy gastrointestinal tract. But it's much, much more than that. The research into probiotics, and probiotic, that term means a bacterium, or when you have many of them, bacteria, okay, which are very helpful and necessary for the health of your intestinal tract, but they do a lot more than that. So the studies now are expanding in so many different areas. There are new brain studies on probiotics. There are new psychological studies for various psychological disorders and probiotics. There are studies on a list of physiological things, not just the immune system. I know that probably all of you have probably heard that most experts believe that at least 70% of your body's total immune function originates in the intestinal tract. So this is really, really a big, important product and a really big picture to talk about. So let me give you sort of a general description of the product first. We'll do ingredients specifically after that, but I want to give you some concepts of why probiotics are so important. Now, this product, GI-ProBalance, is the upgrade, if you will, to the original product that I formulated for Manatech, which was called GI-Pro. Great product. And that product was, in fact, a symbiotic, which I'll explain to you in a moment what that is, before anyone used the term symbiotic. In fact, the thing I was asked to do when I made that first probiotic product for us was, can you create a probiotic that's effective, that covers a broad spectrum, and doesn't need to be refrigerated? And, of course, the answer for me was pretty simple. Yeah, you just combine a probiotic and a prebiotic together. Select the correct prebiotic. A prebiotic is something that nourishes a probiotic so that it can stay healthy while it's in the material waiting for you to use it, okay? So the prebiotic mixed with a probiotic creates what science now calls, but when I made the first product, this word didn't exist, but science now calls it symbiotic. So S-Y-M. So not symbiotic, but symbiotic. So a symbiotic product is a probiotic and a prebiotic combined in the same formula. So GI-Pro was that before anyone else did it. We like being first at Manatech. We like to do this stuff first. And then, of course, it is also key to the function of GI-ProBalance, which is the upgrade to the original product. Now, the original product had 3 very healthy, important strains of probiotic bacteria. GI-ProBalance has 6. And we have specifically selected strains which can survive stomach acid. Why? Well, you got to swallow this stuff. It's going to pass through stomach acid. And there are types of probiotics that don't survive stomach acid very well. So obviously this was an important consideration. You also have far more probiotic in this product, GI-ProBalance, than we had in the original. And that can be important as well, because you do need a lot of probiotic bacteria to do a lot of the functions that I'll be talking about on this call in our next few minutes. So with this in mind, we combine these and we wanted to make it convenient. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people complain of something called pill fatigue. You know, I take too many pills, I take too many capsules. Can you put it in a powder? Can you make it into a flavored powder? Whatever. Well, that's what we did. That was the request, and that's what we did. So this is in a slim stick, or you may want to call it a sachet, whatever you want to call it. And it is flavored, and most people think it tastes pretty darn good. I remember when I launched this product in Australia initially, there was a member of the Australian staff who actually ate all 30 sticks while he was watching me do the presentation launching it on stage, because it tasted so good. And I told him not to get too far from the bathroom that day. But anyway, no other harm would be done on that one. Probiotics are important, obviously, for gastrointestinal health, and they're important to keep your bowel as normal as it can be, normal and healthy. So that's important for your regularity, etc. It's also important for digestion and absorption, more on the absorption side than on the digestive side, because most digestion is going to occur with either digestive enzymes or acid, depending on what we are trying to digest. However, there is still some digestion that takes place with probiotic bacteria once it's in the intestines. But mostly what you're focused on here is absorption. So the digestion hopefully has done its job correctly in your GI tract, and then the probiotic helps you to absorb the nutrients more effectively. Now, it's interesting, we were doing scientific study at Manatech. We were studying how ambrotos actually works in the digestive tract, and what can we see that it does, and how does it interact with various bacterial species in the intestines. By the way, there are more than 500 different types of bacteria which exist in the gastrointestinal tract, and they coexist, right? These are good things that we're talking about. But there are certain ones that are very specific to certain functions, and that's what we were looking to do here, you know, supporting the immune system and supporting various other functions that we've talked about in terms of absorption, etc. Well, as we were doing the testing, what we realized was that ambrotos is a better prebiotic than any prebiotic anybody ever looked at before. The probiotic bacteria love ambrotos. They just love it. And in fact, the more you feed them, not only do they get healthier and they multiply faster, which is a good thing, but it seems that the way ambrotos glyconutrients, or glycans, depending on, glycan is a scientific word, glyconutrients is the commercial term, okay? And some people only know it by glyconutrients. So whichever one you want to call it, it's okay with me. So the absorption of the glyconutrients, or glycans, requires certain probiotics. The probiotics actually, as they're eating them, for nourishment, they create all of the important factors that we need that are then absorbed into your gut. It's so wonderful. So technically, the product GI-ProBalance is symbiotic, so S-Y-M, but it is synbiotic, S-Y-N, like Nancy, S-Y-N, with ambrotos. In fact, it's perfect with ambrotose. Ambrotose makes the GI-ProBalance works better, and GI-ProBalance makes the ambrotose work better. Wow, you just couldn't have a better scenario. Well, we discovered other things as well, but we loved that when we discovered it. Well, when we made the GI-ProBalance, we knew that we had to put certain ingredients in there with the probiotic in order for the probiotic to remain healthy and viable. Viable means alive. So these are healthy bacteria that are good for your body and that need to be alive or viable in that slim stick before you ingest it. And the only way they're going to stay alive and viable is if we give them certain ingredients, such as the prebiotics, as an example. Well, another study that I want to tell you folks about, which I think is exciting. Oh, and let me do the little disclaimer thing here, okay? In the United States, we have another new rule, and we cannot say the word inflammation. Now, in most countries, you can still say the word inflammation, but not in the US. So, if you're just doing business in Australasia, not a problem. But if you're doing business with someone in the US, you're signing up a new US associate, you may not use the word inflammation when you are talking to them. So everybody get that clear in your minds, okay? Because I'm about to talk about inflammation. So you can still talk about it in Australia, at least for now. Who knows what the regulators will do? But for now, that's what you can do. So there are a number of studies now. I mean, the studies are growing rapidly because the interest in this is really growing among scientists. And they're finding that there are a number of inflammatory factors which improve as your probiotic balance in your intestines improves. Now, here's another reason to take probiotics every day. Because most scientists now agree that virtually every kind of immune challenge, and I'm saying every kind of immune challenge, either has an inflammation component or causes inflammation. Some scientists believe that immune problems start as inflammation and then become the immune problem. Well, that argument has not been settled yet. Okay, so they're still fighting about that. But the point is, inflammation's bad, and you don't want it. So 2 of the bacterium that we put in here have a really interesting scientific study behind them. So this is not a study done at Manitech. This was a study done independent of Manitech. And this was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled human study, crossover, etc. Okay? So a very, very strong study the way it was constructed. And what they wanted to do was to give 2 strains of bacterium, and they used Bifidobacterium breve, and they also used another. Now, when I say this, now some of you are going to think, oh my God, that sounds like a terrible thing. It sounds like something bad. Folks, we don't put terrible things in our products. And this other one is called, and don't freak out, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, all right? But it's called Streptococcus thermophilus. Now, Streptococcus thermophilus, I know what you're thinking when you hear it, but it has nothing to do with the throat infection, okay? It's not related to that, so don't worry about that. So they used these 2 in their study because they had already seen very effective changes in inflammation from laboratory study. So now they want to just do this in human beings and see what happens. So they construct this, they make this study with very healthy men who are resistance trained. So these are very physically fit men. They do resistance training every day and so on. And what they wanted to find out is if they simply gave these men these 2 strains of bacterium that I just mentioned, if they simply gave them those, could there be a reduction in the inflammatory biomarkers after exercise? Because this could be a super, super thing, obviously, for athletes or for even the individual who's just trying to keep fit and going to the gym every day. Remember, the older we get, the more inflammatory reaction you are going to have when you are doing resistance to your muscles. And of course, that's going to happen in your joints as well, and so on. Okay. So they tested for two markers. They tested for something called interleukin 6 or IL-6, and they also tested for creatinine kinase, or what's simply listed on medical tests as CK. Now, these are both markers of inflammation. So they gave these healthy men these two strains of probiotic. They went out and did their normal resistance training, and then they measured them from 72 hours post their exercise training. And what they found was that the levels of IL-6 and CK both decreased significantly. And they also found that even 48 hours post-exercise. Now, some of you have heard me speak of DOMS, so that's delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. Any of you who've done physical activity, and especially if you've not done physical activity for a long time and then you do it, and you do a lot of strenuous stuff, it's usually 2 days after the exercise that you start to hurt really bad. And so it can be 1 day for some people, but it's usually 2 days. And then even into the third day, where the muscle soreness and stiffness can be very severe. I mean, for some people, like they can't even move from the pain, okay? So this is very, very important, because these probiotics have a range of other things that they do for the body. And now understand, Manitech does not make an anti-inflammatory claim with this product. We do not make that claim. And once again, just to make sure that we are all legally correct here, this was not a Manitech study. This was done independent of Manitech, and it was done not on GI-ProBalance, but on just 2 of the strains of bacterium, 2 of our 6 strains that we put into GI-ProBalance. For me, this is very exciting, because I think to myself about all of the many, many factors that result in inflammation in the human body. And of course, inflammation is simply never a good thing. It isn't that it hurts. You know, it is an indicator that your immune system is going in the wrong direction. So this is very, very important. And I think, again, very exciting that they found this in this study. Now, there are other studies out there that are pretty exciting as well, but let me get back to the basic formulation, and then I'll do some things with other functions of probiotics. All right, now the prebiotic that we used in this is called fructooligosaccharides. You don't have to spell that, okay? Fructooligosaccharides are, as the name implies, they are naturally occurring saccharides. So plant saccharides. And these are, fructooligosaccharides they can be gotten from many fruits. They can be obtained from some vegetables. For instance, onions have fructooligosaccharides, bananas, lettuce, wheat. So there's a number of sources of that. So that's the prebiotic to keep the probiotic healthy while they are in the slim stick waiting for you to get healthier after you swallow them. Okay. Now, what about the numbers? People ask me about the numbers all the time. Well, is it enough? You know, is 1.5 billion CFUs, and by the way, CFU means colony forming unit. Each of the bacterium, so when you talk about these little critters, as they say in Texas, so each of these little critters, when it's one of them, they're called bacterium, and when there's many of them, they're called bacteria, okay? So these little bacterium, they need to be fed properly so that they can do their job, and of course, once they get into your gut, they can multiply very rapidly. Now, here's the numbers for you. And some people have trouble getting the numbers, or they miss the numbers, or they don't write them down properly, whatever. So listen carefully. One bacterium will multiply into 72 million, that's million with an M, 72 million bacteria in 24 hours. And then it goes geometrically from there. So if you start with 1.5 billion times 72 million in the first 24 hours, you have a whole lot of bacteria happening there. And as long as they've got the right food to eat, and they love to eat ambrotose, as long as they have the right food to eat, they will continue to multiply at that rate. So you'll have lots and lots and lots. And this is why our recommendation is 1 stick per day. Also on the label, you're going to see gum acacia. Well, gum acacia is also known as gum arabic, and it's also known as acacia Senegal, because most of it is grown in the African nation of Senegal, which, by the way, is the birthplace of our CEO, El Bella. He was born and raised in Senegal. Okay. And a lot of people don't know that he's African, but he is. Okay. So gum acacia provides you with galactose, arabinose, glucuronic acid, and rhamnose. These are components of ambrotose, but we didn't put them in there to be a partial ambrotose. We put them in there to be additional feeding, if you will, for the probiotics, because we want those probiotics not just to be viable, we want them to be really healthy when they get into your gut. So what we have here with these 6 different strains is a really powerful, very well-rounded formulation to give you a whole bunch of different functions. And let's talk about some of these functions, and then we'll come back and we'll go to the formulation ingredients, which, perhaps not surprisingly, the majority of the questions I get on products tend to be on formulation ingredients, not the functional ingredients. Very, very interesting, but not surprising, I would say. Now, there's new studies out. I mean, new studies on how to support psychological issues with probiotics and how to support brain health with probiotics. Now, you might say, how in the world do you connect the intestines to the brain? How does that connection happen? Well, you've heard of cellular communication, I'll bet. And we've been talking about that since 1996, but it's only very recently that other scientists have been able to connect the dots, if you will. And so when you talk about your gastrointestinal tract, you might see things like the microbiome. And people say, what the heck is that? And all that means is your total of all of your probiotic in your gastrointestinal tract, along with the corresponding factors. You see, the microbiome, what it is you have all your probiotics and your fungi, because you need fungi to interact with the probiotics in order to generate various substances which then connect through cellular communication. You will, for instance, amino acids can be made from these probiotics interacting with the glyconutrients. You can make neurotransmitters, which of course, as the name implies, a neurotransmitter is something that sends signals to the nervous system, including the brain. And because of the new research on this, here's what scientists are finding. And now remember, on Manatech calls, we do not talk about disease. I'm not going to do that. And you shouldn't talk about disease at any time. But let me say things like, psychological distress. How's that? Yes, a new study on probiotics and psychological distress. A new study on probiotics and academic stress. Okay. How about a study? Well, there's actually more than one study on people who, well, let's say could benefit from mood elevation. Okay. And individuals who are feeling fearful and very worried, there are studies about that as well. So just in the area of psychological issues, probiotics appear to be extremely important through this neurotransmitter activity that I just talked about. The more you read about probiotics, the more excited you have to get. Now, I started early in the call talking about the inflammatory factors involved. Now, we do not talk about diseases. Sometimes you have inflammation in the bowel, and there are studies, quite a few of them actually, which make a very positive connection between probiotic bacteria and inflammation in the gut. And there are a number of other studies that make very positive connections between probiotics and inflammation elsewhere. And now I'm not talking necessarily about an immune problem, but just inflammation elsewhere. So you have so many things that you can think about, you can talk about, that you may be able to support. I want you to imagine, my friends, that you're taking your Ambertos and now you're also taking GI-ProBalance every day. And you begin to experience improvements in areas that, well, you never thought of before, because heck, when people think of a probiotic, they think of their intestinal tract, right? But so many things are interconnected in the human body. And one of the things I love about science today is how so many scientists of various different disciplines, because don't think for a minute that any of us could possibly know everything about everything. That can't happen. It's not humanly possible. But there are so many different scientists of different disciplines, and they're all working in their own specific areas. But we're being able to connect the dots with each other. The internet is really helping us do this. And this is helping us grow scientific knowledge at a rate that no human being can even keep up with anymore. For years, they said, scientific knowledge doubles every 10 years. Well, forget that. It's growing so fast now that you can't even get your computers programmed fast enough to try and catch up with the data. I mean, it's growing phenomenally fast. I might do this product again in 6 months and tell you 5 or 6 other things that I didn't know today. I mean, that's how fast all this is growing. So this is amazing stuff, and this is one of these stay tuned, because there's more to come. I guarantee it. Just the studies that I have already read, and folks, there are now millions literally of studies that have some kind of nutritional link to health. I'll never read them all in my lifetime. I can't keep up with them. Nobody can. They're just going too fast. But just of the ones I've read, wow. I mean, double wow. Super exciting. So the potential applications for immune function, absorption of nutrients, just absorption of nutrients is huge. And your gastrointestinal function, obviously, brain function, psychological issues, and then, of course, inflammation. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what the numbers are in Australasia, because Ray mentioned how busy I am, and folks, I can't even articulate how busy I am, especially this weekend. But I'll tell you what, in this area, it's huge. It is so huge. In the US alone, 1 out of every 2 Americans, and right now there are 327 million Americans, 1 out of every 2 Americans suffers from some form of inflammation. Now, I don't know what your numbers are in Australasia, but I'll bet you it's got to be pretty close, because humans are humans. And, our biology doesn't vary. Well, it does vary a bit by race, of course, but we're all humans. So I suspect that you probably have a huge number of folks in Australasia that have some form of inflammation, and you folks can still talk about it down there. So that's a real plus for you. So let's get to the formulation ingredients. Now, the reason that I get asked so many questions about formulation ingredients is because often people don't recognize what they are. Sometimes they'll have a potential customer who will look at a label, they'll see something, they'll Google it, they'll get something that they don't understand, or perhaps it's something that's simply inaccurate or incorrect. And so I get questions on this stuff all the time. So let's go over that real quick. In the formulation ingredients, and when I'm using this term, I'm talking about the ingredients that you may need as a flow agent, an anti-clumping agent, a thickening agent, a stabilizing agent, a mixing agent, that kind of thing. If you make a capsule, you have to have a flow agent. If you make a slim stick, you have to have a flow agent. Now, we try at Manatech to use natural agents as much as we possibly can. We have in some countries where we can't do that because that's the rules. And there are occasional products where that can't be done. But in this product, everything in this product is natural. Everything. So your thickening agent, your flow agent, your stabilizing agent, everything is natural. But formulation ingredients are not considered as functional ingredients because they have nothing to do with the actual function of the formula. And very often, their only function is to interact with the active materials to stabilize it, to mix it, to whatever, okay? So you'll see on the label maltodextrin. And maltodextrin is a naturally occurring polysaccharide. Now, some people will say, oh, I read something that maltodextrin could raise your blood sugar. Yeah, if you eat it by the mountain, of course it could. And there are a few polysaccharides that could. Now, the amyloidose polysaccharides don't, okay? But there are a few that can. But the amount of maltodextrin that we're using in here is below that level, so it shouldn't be an issue for anybody, okay? Now, maltodextrin, it's very easy to absorb into the human gastrointestinal tract. And it is regarded as safe, and so you don't have any problem with that. But we have to use the maltodextrin. It does contribute to sweetness a little bit in the product because it's one of the few polysaccharides from nature which is actually sweet. Most plant sugars are not sweet, but maltodextrin does have a little bit of sweetness to it. And this is also used as a part of our flow agent. Now, in addition to that, you'll see modified food starch. Well, the modified food starch is there primarily as a thickening agent, and it's also contributes to texture and so on. As you have to imagine that the majority of the slim stick, of course, is not going to be the 1.5 billion bacteria, because bacteria are super tiny, okay? But we have to be able to mix it into something where it will stay stable and stay properly mixed, because this is coming from huge vats that are then being individually poured into the sachets. Everything has got to be properly mixed and stabilized before it goes in there. You'll also see silicone dioxide. Now, silica is something that occurs naturally in a whole bunch of stuff. Almost every kind of grain you can think of, and sugar beets and sugar cane and soybeans, turnips, green beans, lots of stuff contains silica. By the way, you contain silica. because it's part of what you need for healthy bones. Okay, but that's not why we have this in the formula. Now, the silica is in the formula because we need this, and this would be, you'll see this in a lot of our capsules as well. We need this as an anti-clumping agent. Because this is naturally occurring, we think it's a great way to keep the material from clumping up. Again, when you're mixing different materials that are not normally mixing together by themselves, you have to do other things to make it happen. Okay, so that's what's in there, and no, it's not bad for you, and it's not like that stuff that you find in the little bag of crystals in the electronics products that you buy. That's different. Okay, so don't worry about that. Now, most of the sweetness in this product, and you will find that it is quite sweet, most of the sweetness is from xylitol. Xylitol is called a sugar alcohol. In fact, if you take any plant saccharide or plant sugar and you make it through the alcohol extraction process, it's then called a sugar alcohol, and it will end in OL. So the sugar that we start with is xylose. Okay? Whenever you see a word that ends in OSE, it means it's a sugar of some type. Xylose is a wonderful plant sugar. It's one of the few plant sugars which is sweet, but xylose, especially in the form of xylitol, and don't worry, there's no alcohol in the product, okay? A sugar alcohol, it means it's been made with the alcohol extraction process, not that it is an alcohol or that it contains alcohol. I get that question all the time, okay? So xylitol has been studied in individual studies, and I think this is exciting. It's been shown to reduce ear infections in children, xylitol. But most important is that xylitol reduces tooth decay. Xylitol is sweet, and it protects your teeth from cavities. How cool is that? Every dentist who discovers xylitol gets just all excited about it. I mean, I've had dentists say to me, why don't you make this product and that product with xylitol? Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. That's different complications. I personally only use xylitol as a sweetener. That's all I ever use. When I travel, I carry little packets, so they're like the size of a sugar packet that you might get on a restaurant table, okay? But it's filled with xylitol instead of sugar or instead of an artificial sweetener, because this is natural. It's low glycemic. In fact, it's almost zero glycemic, which means it doesn't raise your blood sugar. That's really good. Protects your teeth from tooth decay. In fact, since I've started using xylitol as my only sweetener, I've had no cavities at all. That's pretty cool. I love that. So here you have a way to make something sweet, and it does taste really good. I think this product does taste really good. And it has these other benefits. Now, Manitech doesn't make the tooth decay benefit. Okay, I'm not saying that's a Manitech claim. But what I am telling you is that is a known benefit of xylitol. So if you're wondering, why did we use that and say not stevia? And most people incorrectly say stevia. It's really pronounced stevia. Stevia has a pretty tough aftertaste. And it's pretty hard to sweeten some things with stevia and make it taste decent, okay? Even though stevia is the most common natural sweetener in the world. It's most commonly used. There are some individuals, on a rare case, it's rare, and it takes a fair amount of xylitol to do it, more than you have in these slim sticks, okay? But one of the reasons that we don't use xylitol all the time for everything is because at a certain level of xylitol, you may have some people that have some gas or bloating that develops, okay? Whereas with maltodextrin, it goes into your gut really fast. Xylitol is a little more difficult to break down. Most people do it fine. Every once in a while, there's somebody who doesn't. You'll also notice yogurt flavor, and of course, that's actually made from fermented milk, just like what you'd think it is, okay? Because we had to put a flavor in this, obviously, as you want to make it taste good. So this is, again, another very, very positive thing. Now, one of the bacteria that we have put in this product specifically produces lactic acid in your gut. Now, I know that sounds bad, but it's actually good. Why is it good? Because if you produce lactic acid in your intestinal tract versus your muscles, if you make it in your muscles are hurt. But if you make it in your gastrointestinal tract, it helps you break down dairy products. So that's a very good thing. And that was another reason why we chose that particular one. Okay. Now the question always comes up because people understandably, they see the word lactose as part of a word, or they know that there's dairy involved, they know there's yogurt involved, and there's a lot of people in the world that do not know the difference between lactose intolerance and milk allergy. They're two different things entirely, with two different causes and two different sets of symptoms, okay? Most people, if they're lactose intolerant and they consume enough dairy to have a reaction, they say, oh my God, I'm allergic to dairy. Okay. Now, folks, the allergy is caused by a protein in milk, which is called casein. Has nothing to do with lactose at all. Lactose, remember, if the word ends in OSE, it's a sugar. If the word ends in ASE, it's an enzyme. Okay, so think of all the cool stuff you're learning today. Right. So then, if your body is not naturally producing enough of an enzyme called lactase, and you ingest a food that contains lactose, then you don't have the enzyme to break that down, and the result will be cramping, bloating, diarrhea, that kind of thing. Those are lactose intolerant symptoms versus an allergy. Now, if you want to be sure if you're allergic to something, well, you go to a medical doctor who is an allergist, and you get the appropriate tests. Okay. Guessing is not something I ever like to do as a scientist. I like to be sure of what I'm talking about before I talk about it. So then, people say, well, it's got dairy and I think I'm allergic to dairy. Well, if you think you are, go get a test and find out if you are. That's important because you don't want to take anything into your body if you're allergic to it. That's for certain. Okay. Well, once you've confirmed that you're not allergic, then the next question is, are you lactose intolerant? Well, we did, as I say, we did put one of the bacterium that we put into this product specifically produces lactic acid that helps you break down lactose in your gastrointestinal tract, and that is where you would be feeling the symptoms, okay? The gas, the bloating, and so on would be in your gastrointestinal tract. So then the question comes up, well, how much lactose does it take to get a lactose intolerance reaction? The bloating, the diarrhea, all that stuff. According to the World Health Organization, it takes 12 grams or more. Now, your standard glass of milk is going to have about 12 grams of lactose. That naturally occurs in the milk, okay? Most people can tolerate, who are lactose intolerant, can tolerate up to 12 grams. So then you say, well, how much is in this? We're talking a fraction, a small fraction of a gram. It's so low that we don't even have to list it, okay? So is it possible that you'll have a reaction to this product because there are some components that are made from dairy? Is it possible? Yeah, I suppose, really remotely possible, and there might be life on Venus too. okay? But it's going to be pretty slim probability, okay? All right, let's talk about a few things because we're getting closer to the end of this training hour. So there are a long list of claims approved in the US, but not all the same claims are approved in every country. Again, since we are a global company, this means that you have to be aware of the claims in that country before you start your presentation to the new person that you hope to start on our products. Make sure that you've got them all. So on your flyer, it talks about the fact that everything in the product is natural. No artificial sweeteners, no artificial flavors, no artificial colors. We've had no artificial formulation agents added to it. So none of that stuff. So you've got a completely natural product. The vitamin C in it is natural. I know it says ascorbic acid, and I know that Manitech Associates have been misinformed on that. Ascorbic acid is simply the formal name for vitamin C. It is not the case that if it says ascorbic acid, it always means it's synthetic. This is not true, okay? Ascorbic acid is simply the formal name for vitamin C. So you can see your approved claims on this. If you, on my screen, I can't see the whole thing. Can you scroll up just a little bit on it, Ray? Yeah, the other way. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you. So you see your approved claims for Australasia are right there under benefits. Those are your benefits claims. And you can certainly say any of those powerful things. But I wanted you today, and I've given you so much more to understand about the possibilities of probiotics and why they're important. So when you're sharing, you want to make sure that you're not sharing in a way where you're saying, Manitech says that this will happen for you for sure, or something to that effect, okay? So understand the way that I shared with you today, where I said to you, there are studies which are not Manitech studies, but these are independent studies that indicate the following things. And if you use that kind of language, you're in pretty good shape, okay? And you want people to know, and another thing that you can do, which if I was building a downline, I'd probably do myself, is, I might get to a certain point and say, you know what? You should Google xylitol. You should Google whatever, okay? And what you usually will come up with when you're using a scientific term instead of a commercial term, you'll usually come up with good scientific stuff that you won't usually have too much nonsense that appears on there, which is I personally like to use the word glycan. Now, I know our company says glyconutrients, and we've always said that, and I'm not going to get into a sword fight with anybody over this, okay? But I personally like to use the word glycan because when you Google glycan, everything you come up with is science, no nonsense, because that's a scientific term. And if you Google glyconutrient, well, you might come up with all kinds of nonsense, okay? And who needs more nonsense? So you'll see that on your flyer, it does a very nice job of giving you the basics, but I think you need to go a few steps beyond in terms of talking about the importance of gut health and the fact that there are studies out there that are now making a clear connection between the gut and the brain, between the gut and behavior, between the gut and the immune system. And of course, the inflammatory studies, and there are so many now. And personally, folks, as long as you, in my opinion, and I'm not in the legal department, obviously, but in my opinion, as long as you're allowed to use a powerful word, use it. That's the way I see it. Because we are on a mission to help as many people as we can on this planet with our products. And you can't help them if you can't convince them to put this stuff in their mouth. So this is where it starts. And once you are well armed and confident, then you can get the job done effectively out there. And that's really what I'm hoping for all of you. So that's kind of the synopsis of GI-ProBalance, our symbiotic, which is made deliberately, purposefully, to work in conjunction with Ambritose, and it will work beautifully with all Ambritose products, including the new one that you folks will have coming up in September. So it works with all of them beautifully, works with all of them the same way. Okay?